You have probably been told your whole life that something is wrong with you, that you think too much, that you are too intense, that you are wired differently from everyone around you. And you believed it. You tucked those strange habits away and tried to act normal, tried to fit into a world that seemed designed for a different kind of brain. But what if those exact habits, the ones people called weird, are the very things that reveal a mind operating on a completely different level? Psychologists have spent years studying intelligence, not just test scores or grades, real intelligence, the kind that rewires how a person sees the world, the kind that shows up not in classrooms, but in the quiet, strange, sometimes lonely moments of everyday life. And what they found might surprise you. Because the key signs of a genius-level mind do not always look like what you would expect. They do not look polished. They do not look perfect. In fact, they often look strange, even broken. So if you have ever felt like your brain works in ways nobody else seems to understand, stay here, because this is about to change how you see yourself. And honestly, it might change how you see every person who has ever been called too much or not enough. Because genius does not announce itself with fireworks. It whispers in the habits that make people uncomfortable, in the silence that others cannot stand, in the strange little things you do when nobody is watching. Let us start with the first trait, and it is one that most people would never connect to. Intelligence. Talking to yourself. Out loud. Not in your head, actually moving your lips, muttering words, sometimes full sentences when nobody else is around. Most people think this is a sign that something is off, that you are losing your grip. But psychologists say the opposite is true. Researchers at Bangor University ran an experiment where they gave people a set of objects to find. Half of the group was told to say the names of those objects out loud. The other half stayed silent. The result was clear. The people who talked to themselves found the objects faster, sometimes by nearly 100 milliseconds. That might not sound like a lot, but in the world of brain processing, that is a massive gap. What was happening was something psychologists call self-directed speech. When you speak your thoughts out loud, you are not just rambling. You are giving your brain an extra layer of processing power. You are turning invisible thoughts into something concrete, something your ears can hear and your mind can grab onto. Consider a case profile of a student who could never study in silence. Every night before exams, she would pace around her room, reading her notes out loud, arguing with herself about which answer made more sense. Her roommates thought she was strange, but she was consistently one of the top performers in her class. Her brain was not broken. It was building something. Psychologists at the University of Waterloo found that speaking text out loud helps move information into long-term memory more effectively than reading silently. They called it the production effect. The act of producing the words, hearing them come back, and processing them a second time creates a stronger memory trace. So the next time you catch yourself talking to nobody, do not stop. Your brain is doing exactly what a high-functioning mind does. It is working overtime, in the most efficient way it knows how. And the people who stare at you for it simply do not realize they are watching intelligence in action. Now here is where things get a little more uncomfortable. The second trait that reveals a genius-level mind is a messy environment. Not just a cluttered desk, a truly chaotic space. Papers everywhere, books stacked at strange angles, old coffee cups sitting next to half-finished notebooks. Most people look at a mess like that and see laziness. They see someone who cannot get it together. But researchers at the University of Minnesota found something fascinating. They set up 2 rooms. One was perfectly clean and organized. The other was deliberately messy. Papers scattered, supplies out of place, everything in visible disorder. Then they asked participants in both rooms to come up with creative uses for a common object. Both groups generated the same number of ideas. But the ideas from the messy room were rated significantly more creative and original by independent judges. The lead researcher, Kathleen Vose, put it simply: disorderly environments seem to inspire people to break free from tradition. And that break from tradition is where fresh thinking is born. Think about it like this. When everything around you is neat, your brain follows neat patterns. It stays inside the lines. But when the environment is chaotic, your brain has to work differently. It has to find connections in the disorder. And that is exactly what creative genius-level thinking looks like. A composite example based on observed patterns would be an inventor whose workshop looked like a disaster zone. Tools mixed with drawings, mixed with food wrappers, mixed with half-built prototypes. To an outsider, it looked like a mess. To him, every object in that room was part of a web of ideas. He knew where everything was, not because it was organized in a way anyone else would understand, but because his brain had its own system, one that worked perfectly for the way he thought. So if your space looks like a storm hit it, you might just be the kind of person whose mind needs that freedom to roam. Order feels safe. But genius rarely lives inside the lines. It lives in the spaces between things. In the chaos that most people would clean up before they ever gave it a chance to become something beautiful. The third trait might be the most misunderstood of all, and it is the need to be alone. Not loneliness, not social anxiety, a genuine, deep, almost physical need for solitude. Most people fill their days with noise, with people, with constant stimulation, and there is nothing wrong with that. But genius-level thinkers are different. They crave silence the way most people crave connection. A study published in the British Journal of Psychology found something remarkable. More intelligent people actually reported lower life satisfaction when they spent more time socializing. Read that again. The smarter they were, the less happy frequent social interaction made them. This does not mean they hate people. It means their minds are already so active, so full of thoughts and ideas and patterns, that adding more input from the outside world can actually feel overwhelming. Solitude is not an escape for them. It is a workshop. It is where they process everything, where they connect dots nobody else can see, where the noise of the world falls away and the real thinking begins. We see this dynamic clearly in the story of many great thinkers throughout history. People who did their best work in isolation, who disappeared for days, sometimes weeks, not because they were depressed, but because they were deep inside a problem that fascinated them. Their loved ones worried, their friends stopped calling, but inside that silence, something extraordinary was being built. If you find yourself needing to pull away from the world just to hear your own thoughts, that is not weakness. That is your mind demanding the space it needs to do what it does best. Most people run from silence. But for the genius mind, silence is not empty. It is the loudest room in the house. It is where every idea that was buried under the noise of the day finally gets a chance to breathe. And when those ideas breathe, they grow into things the world has never seen before. The fourth trait is one that most people actively try to suppress, and it is having an unusual sense of humor. Not the kind that makes everyone laugh, the kind that makes people stare at you, the kind that is layered, referential, sometimes dark, and almost always misunderstood. Researchers at the University of Vienna conducted a study where they tested people who enjoyed dark or complex humor. What they found was striking. Those who appreciated this kind of humor scored higher on both verbal and nonverbal intelligence tests. They also showed lower levels of aggression and higher levels of emotional stability. This makes sense when you think about what humor actually requires. To find something funny, especially something complex or unexpected, your brain has to make rapid connections between ideas that do not normally go together. It has to hold multiple layers of meaning at once and find the surprising link between them. That is not a simple process. That is high-level cognitive work happening in real time. A narrative illustration might look like this. A person sitting at a dinner party makes a joke that references philosophy, a childhood cartoon, and a current news event all in one sentence. Nobody laughs. A few people exchange confused glances. But in that moment, that person's brain just performed a feat of mental gymnastics that most people could not replicate if they tried. The humor of a genius mind is not designed to entertain a crowd. It is the natural output of a brain that is constantly connecting, linking, and finding patterns across completely different domains. So if your jokes land flat more often than not, it might not be your delivery. It might just be that your audience has not caught up to where your mind already is. And there is a strange kind of loneliness in that, laughing at something nobody else finds funny. Seeing the absurdity in a situation while everyone else nods along seriously. But that loneliness is the price of a mind that moves faster and sees further than the people around it. And deep down, even when nobody laughs, you know the joke was brilliant. The fifth trait is something that gets labeled as a flaw almost every single time. Overthinking. That relentless, unstoppable mental loop where you replay conversations, analyze decisions from every angle, and imagine outcomes that may never happen. Most people see overthinking as a problem, a source of anxiety, something to be fixed. And yes, it can be painful. But psychologists have found that the tendency to overthink is strongly linked to higher cognitive ability. Your brain is not malfunctioning. It is doing what it was built to do. Processing, just at a level that most minds never reach. A clinical psychologist noted in a widely cited paper that high IQ individuals tend to overthink and overanalyze things. They can get stuck in loops, yes, but those loops are not pointless. They are the brain running simulations, testing scenarios, looking for flaws in the plan before the plan even exists. Consider a case profile of a business owner who could never just make a decision and move on. Every choice, no matter how small, got analyzed from 10 different directions. Her team thought she was indecisive. But the truth was, by the time she finally made a move, she had already accounted for problems nobody else had even thought of. Her decisions almost always turned out to be the right ones, because her brain had already lived through every possible failure before she committed to a path. The burden of overthinking is real. It keeps you up at night. It makes simple choices feel heavy. But it is also one of the clearest signs that your mind operates on a level that goes far beyond the surface. You are not worrying for no reason. You are seeing deeper than everyone else. And that comes at a cost. The cost is peace. The cost is the ability to just let things go the way other people seem to do so easily. But in return, you get something most people will never have. A mind that catches what everyone else misses. A mind that sees around corners. And even though it hurts sometimes, that kind of vision is irreplaceable. The sixth trait is one you might not expect on this list, and it is being a night owl, staying up late, doing your best thinking when the rest of the world has gone quiet. Most of society is built around early mornings, alarm clocks, sunrise routines. The idea that productive people wake up at 5 in the morning and seize the day. But research tells a different story. Multiple studies have found a strong correlation between higher intelligence and a preference for staying up late. One widely referenced study found that individuals with higher IQs were significantly more likely to be night owls than early risers. The theory behind this is fascinating. Throughout most of human history, nighttime was dangerous. It was dark. Predators were active. The safest thing to do was sleep when the sun went down and wake when it rose. Staying awake after sundown was risky. It went against every survival instinct written into our biology. So the brains that chose to stay up late, that found value in the quiet hours when everyone else was asleep, were the ones that were actively breaking away from evolutionary programming. They were choosing novelty over safety, exploration over routine, and that willingness to push past biological defaults, to override what the body is telling you to do because your mind is not finished yet, is itself a marker of cognitive flexibility and higher intelligence. We see this pattern clearly in the lives of many brilliant minds. Writers who did their best work at 2 in the morning. Scientists who made breakthroughs during all-night sessions in the lab. Musicians who created their most powerful pieces in the stillness of the late hours. There is something about the night that strips away distraction. The world gets quieter. The phone stops buzzing. And for a genius-level mind, that silence is not empty. It is full of possibility. So if you have always been someone who comes alive after dark, do not fight it. That is not a bad habit. That is your brain telling you when it performs at its peak. The world may tell you to wake up earlier, to follow the schedule that works for everyone else. But your mind is not like everyone else, and forcing it into a pattern that does not fit is like asking a river to flow uphill. It will resist, because it knows, on some deep biological level, exactly when it does its best work. Trust it. The 7th and final trait might be the most beautiful one, and it is an almost painful level of curiosity, not casual interest, not a passing wonder. Not the kind of curiosity that Googles something and moves on after reading the first paragraph. A deep, burning, sometimes obsessive need to understand how things work, why things happen, what lies beneath the surface of everything you see and touch and experience. Psychologists have long recognized curiosity as one of the strongest predictors of intelligence. But the kind of curiosity that marks a genius-level mind goes beyond just asking questions. It is the kind that keeps you up reading about a topic you discovered 3 hours ago. The kind that makes you pull apart a device just to see what is inside. The kind that sends you down rabbit holes so deep you forget what time it is or when you last ate. This is not distraction. This is a mind that refuses to accept the surface-level explanation. A mind that needs to know not just what happened, but why. And not just why once, but why at every level, until the answer finally feels complete. A composite example based on observed patterns might look like this. A young person becomes fascinated with how bridges stay up. That fascination leads them to physics. Physics leads to math. Math leads to philosophy. Philosophy leads to questions about consciousness. And suddenly, they are awake at 3 in the morning reading about the nature of reality, all because they once wondered about a bridge. That chain of curiosity, that refusal to stop at the first answer, is not a quirk. It is genius at work. It is a brain that is never satisfied with good enough, that always wants to go one layer deeper, one question further, until it reaches something that feels like truth. And here is what makes this trait both powerful and painful. The world does not always reward curiosity this deep. People will tell you to stop asking so many questions, to just accept things the way they are, to move on. But your brain cannot move on, not because it is stuck, but because it knows there is more. There is always more. And that knowing, that relentless pull toward understanding, is the engine that drives every great discovery, every great invention, every great work of art that has ever existed. And so here we are. 7 traits. 7 things the world often calls weird, broken, or too much. But when you look at them through the lens of psychology, a completely different picture forms. These are not flaws. They are signals, markers of a mind that was built for something more than the ordinary. The talking, the mess, the solitude, the strange humor, the endless thinking, the late nights, the curiosity that never rests. Each one of these is a thread. And when you pull them all together, they weave something extraordinary. The hard part is that living with a genius-level mind does not always feel like a gift. It can feel like a burden. The overthinking keeps you awake. The need for solitude makes you feel disconnected. The humor nobody understands makes you wonder if you belong anywhere at all. And the curiosity can feel like a hunger that never gets satisfied, no matter how much you feed it. But here is the truth that most people never hear. The very things that make you feel out of place are the same things that give you the power to see what others miss, to think what others cannot, to create what others never will. You are not wired wrong. You are wired rare, and the world needs exactly what your mind has to offer. If any of these traits hit close to home, drop a comment below and tell us where you are watching from. We love hearing from this community, and if you have not already, consider subscribing to the channel. We put out content like this every week, designed for the kinds of minds that never stop asking why. We will see you in the next one.